By 2013, Microsoft had already spent more than $1 billion trying to win your living room. Not on games, not on consoles, but on a future where your TV, your gestures, your voice, and your data all belonged inside one glowing black box. And then, in a single night, the audience turned on them. Pre-orders collapsed, memes went viral, and the Xbox brand, built over more than a decade, lost control of its own story. This isn't the tale of a bad product, it's the story of a billion-dollar bet on the wrong future. Long before the backlash, Microsoft had a vision that went far beyond gaming. They didn't just want to sell you a console, they wanted to become the operating system of your home. Inside Redmond, the idea was simple and powerful. The television was still the biggest screen in the house. If Microsoft could control that screen, they wouldn't just compete with Sony and Nintendo, they would compete with Apple, Google, cable companies, and the entire future of digital entertainment. The Xbox wasn't supposed to be a toy, it was supposed to be a platform. This was the thinking behind a risky, expensive obsession: motion, voice, and presence. A world where you didn't press buttons, you spoke, you moved, you were seen. And at the center of that vision was a little black bar that would quietly become one of the most expensive pieces of hardware in gaming history. Kinect launched in 2010, and at first it looked like magic. No controller, no buttons, just your body tracked in space. It sold millions, it broke records, it made headlines far beyond gaming. Researchers used it in robotics labs, doctors used it in physical therapy. Hackers tore it open and built things no one at Microsoft had imagined. Inside the company, Kinect wasn't a peripheral, it was proof of the future. So when the next console was designed, Kinect wasn't optional, it was mandatory. Every living room would have a camera, every console would be always listening, always aware. That decision alone added roughly $100 to the cost of every unit. Microsoft didn't just subsidize it, they absorbed it for years. By the time the dust settled, analysts would estimate the Kinect experiment and its integration into Xbox strategy had burned through well over $1 billion in development, manufacturing, and lost pricing flexibility. But money wasn't the real cost, control was. In May 2013, Microsoft stepped onto the stage to reveal the future of Xbox. What they showed wasn't a gaming console, it was a media hub. Live TV, sports deals, voice commands, cloud integration, digital rights management. Games came later. And then came the policies. Always online requirements, restrictions on used games, a console designed not just to play what you bought, but to know where it came from. To Microsoft, this made sense. They were building a platform for a digital future, a world without discs, a world of accounts, licenses, ecosystems. To players, it felt like surveillance wrapped in plastic. Within hours, the narrative was out of Microsoft's hands. Sony didn't need a billion-dollar marketing campaign. They just needed one sentence. This is how you share games on PlayStation. The clip went viral. The damage was done. Because Kinect was bundled in, the Xbox One launched more expensive than its rival. Same generation, same living room, different futures. One side promised simplicity, the other promised control. Developers quietly complained. The Kinect was powerful, but it drained system resources. Games had to be built around hardware most players didn't use and many didn't want. So studios ignored it. Players unplugged it, and Microsoft was left carrying the cost of a feature no one asked for. Within a year, the company reversed course. Kinect became optional. Policies were rolled back. The vision was quietly dismantled, but the damage wasn't reversible. The brand had already been labeled. This wasn't just about Sony. Behind the scenes, Microsoft feared something bigger. A world where the living room belonged to Silicon Valley, not Redmond. Apple had the iPhone, Google had Android and YouTube, Netflix was replacing cable, Amazon was creeping toward the TV. The Xbox One was meant to be Microsoft's beachhead into that war, a console that wasn't just for games, but for everything. But in trying to become the gatekeeper of the future, Microsoft forgot who had given them the room in the first place. Players didn't buy Xbox to join an ecosystem. They bought it to play.
The irony is brutal. Kinect was years ahead of its time. Voice assistants would soon live in millions of homes. Cameras would sit on top of laptops and phones without controversy. Motion tracking would become normal in VR and AR. Microsoft wasn't wrong about the future. They were wrong about the moment. By forcing the vision instead of letting it grow, they turned a technological advantage into a liability. And the cost wasn't just measured in dollars, it was measured in trust. The recovery took years. A new leadership team shifted the strategy. Games returned to the center. Backward compatibility rebuilt goodwill. Game Pass reframed Xbox not as a box, but as a service. Slowly, the story changed, but the generation was lost. Not because the hardware failed, not because the engineers failed, but because a company bet everything on owning the future and forgot to listen to the present. If this feels familiar, it should. This is the same tension that runs through so many corporate giants. Control versus openness, platform versus product, ecosystem versus experience. The Xbox One wasn't just a console, it was a corporate philosophy in plastic form. And for one generation, that philosophy cost more than market share. It cost a billion-dollar dream of ruling the living room. Today, Microsoft is back in the race. Cloud gaming, subscriptions, devices everywhere. In many ways, the future they wanted in 2013 is finally arriving, just not through the box they built to control it. And the question that lingers isn't whether Microsoft was wrong, it's whether being too early with the right idea can be just as expensive as being completely wrong.